Zach, what's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all. Thank you. Not too bad.
Sweet, man. Well, I'm glad you were able to, jump on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I checked everything out after I saw the post. I think that's it's awesome what you're doing. They're
Uh,
fun conversations, right? And they're
Dude, so fun, so deep. It's like such a multi-layered onion.
right.
Dealing with entrepreneurialism and then putting family on top of that and all the, positives and crazy stuff that goes in between,
It's a unique, and it's hard. Like EO's been great for me in the sense of having just entrepreneurs to speak to, and that's
Yeah.
similar, the similar mindset, similar vibe, similar issues, and it's just a healthier conversation.
Yeah.
It's that extra layer when you introduce the family that it's it's nice to have people within that same vein, and I'm happy to share the story because it's
Heck yeah.
you're not alone, and for all the great, because there's so much great that comes with that and the opportunity.
Yeah.
There's just as much of the nuanced struggle, and it's that constant shift as
I mean, did you seek out a forum with other kind of family businesses or not really? It's
no, I'm our chapter is really small. We're only 40 members. So it was very much place where you're gonna go and figure it
yeah.
out. And I got really lucky with mine. I was actually an SAP originally.
Oh,
So
okay.
I didn't have ownership in the family business at the time and was recruited to join, but by the chapter president who's a buddy of mine. And I was like,
Okay.
I don't have any ownership. He's like, that's a problem. He's like, but join as an SAP. And then eventually, as we started seeding ownership and that joyous adventure, which I'm sure we'll get into,
Mhm.
uh, it's I joined as a full member 3 years ago.
Okay.
So that's found form that was pretty established, but they knew me because I was an SAP. So it
Perfect.
was it was a healthy balance there.
Well, yeah, let's get into it. I'd love to hear. So fifth generation. So how many years has it spanned?
Yeah, so originally started in 1870. We're 3 years younger than Canada. So it's yeah, one of the oldest independent family owned business in the country at this point. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, it's the folklore story of it, which is always fun. Is my great grandfather at the time lived in it's a city where and it's Guelph, which wasn't called that at the time. But there was a fire in a nearby village, and he took his horse and buggy over, helped clean up the whole village, and then sold them fire policies that day. And that's the essence of where Sutherland Insurance began. I can't validate that, but I love the story.
Story. We,
So
we, we have these stories when we question them, we just go with them.
100%, 100%.
Okay, cool. So 1870. And so tell me all the family members. I would love to be at like a family retreat of y'all's, and like, and I'm trying to picture the family tree. And I mean, if you can, tell me about all the family members that have been involved over the years, and
Yeah,
who's working with you now.
absolutely. So it started with my great grandfather, and then it passed to his my great grandfather and his two brothers, then to my grandfather, that's and his uncles. Now my great uncles, his brothers. Um, all three of them passed very young. So my dad transitioned in, Gen 3. Uh, my grandpa passed, I think he was 51. So my dad was still in college at the time. And my grandma had to step into the business. And with the insurance space and the insurance broker space in Ontario, you need somebody who has a deputy license, right, to continue the
Wow.
business. So my grandmother took the licensing course. You can only fail it twice at the time. Fail it three times, done. Business is sold. She passed it on the third time. The fortuitous little
Wow.
right things that happen over the course of the business. It could have been gone. But she passed it the third time, kept it in place. My dad slowly started taking over, and it was his show. That was 79, I believe, when my grandfather passed. My dad
Mhm.
21 and 22, he took it over and he's still in the business as the chairman. But has been going for 45 plus years now within the business and doing an amazing job of that. And then I joined, I started working in the business at 13, as you do in a family shop, doing it whatever you can. I wrote my, license to be a broker when I was 18, still in university. And right out of university, I wrote my LSATs to go to law school and got in and just kind of did hey, what's
Yeah.
next 15 years of my life going to look like, going to be a partner somewhere and coming back, or getting the real
Yeah.
experience of being in the shop and figuring it out. So that was kind of the journey to where we sat today. And it's, you know, done everything in the office from take the garbage out to sales,
Yeah.
service to claims across the board, which gave me a pretty, you know, the perspective I had to be able to shift and change things as they were managed.
Yeah.
And I was promoted to president about 6, 7 years ago now. And my dad's, you know, slowly taking his steps back as we've gone. I love the story because it's a very family business promotion. I like to say it was, you know, called in for lunch, no idea what was happening, and my dad put the meeting on the calendar is usually bad. So I was like, what's happening here? Like, what's going on? So show up, and it was me and my stepbrothers in the business, and I'll get to Steve here in a minute. He's our vice president now, but it was two of us, and he was like, all right, I'm promoting you to president, Zach, promoted Steve to vice president. I'm like, we're like, oh my God, thank you. Like, we're kind of bracing for, like, I don't know what the hell's going on. It just seems like I was so out of left field. But we're like, thank you. And then kind of let it go. I was like, so what's like changing about what we do? It goes, oh, absolutely nothing. And I was like, and I was like, well, thank you. He's like, yeah, this is more like so people see that this is happening, but like, no, nothing's gonna actually change. I'm like, so like no more money? No, absolutely not. Oh, okay, two thumbs, right? It's the and it's I get his point, and it's not that he ever wasn't incredibly fair with me. He still is to this
Yeah.
day. But it was just you know the joys of that evolution of that grind and getting to where I go, or getting to where we are today. It's there's been those kind of just funny family business scenarios more than anything, where it's that public out facing like this is the thing, but what's really happening in the background is this has been happening for a long time, and this is
Yeah.
the recognition of the work.
Yeah.
So Zach, I actually got licensed at age 18. Also went to college for risk management, got my degree, worked for Aon for a couple decades in New York. So very familiar with the industry. Um, do you have any brothers or sisters in the business as well?
Yeah, so my stepbrother's in the business, and he joined our firm about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And he'd had a bit of a journey through the underwriting side, working for a local company. He went over to the UK and did a bit of work for an underwriter there. Came back, did some MGA work as well. But landed back with us after you know, his path actually. His father owned a brokerage as well, but ended up selling. So he was looking for a place to kind of land his feet, and gave me a call once the sale was official because I thought he was going back to that business, to be fair. But once the sale actually became official, he's like, "Would you like to work together?" And I'm fortunate in that scenario. We've all heard the step sibling stories or sibling stories in general that don't go well. But he's really wonderful, really smart, really dedicated to the business, and we formed quite the partnership to be able to push this forward.
So with so many generations and nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters, has the organization set up any sort of structure around like who gets in? What are the requirements in order to be part of the business? Because this is where a lot of family businesses struggle, and can cause a lot of strife within within the family. Many families have kind of a coat of arms, a code of ethics. This is our principles as a family. What sort of things have you done to navigate, you know, those landmines of potentially causing strife in a family?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and you know we're still navigating. I think that's always a constant battle, but we've made huge strides in the last few years, and I think it's part and parcel with our growth over this last period. We've really taken something that you know can maybe retire a generation to potentially retiring multiple generations, and that causes the additional stress of where do we sit, who fits where, and how do we make that work. So we were
It's all
fortunate
it's all fun and games until there's money.
until
Then
there's
it's
right.
real, right? Everybody gets along when there's a little bit of money. Then when there's a lot of money, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right. And we had very, you know, real conversations around and so to continue my family tree and where that potentially fits, my father doesn't have any siblings, so it's just him at that level and my stepmother. And then I have my stepbrothers obviously in the business and my sister and my stepsister. So my sister lives in New York City, family kid, wonderful job, doing her thing, lives a dream, wants nothing to do with the business, but is
Yeah,
as a percentage of it naturally.
shareholder.
And then my stepsister as well is going to be not involved with working directly in the business, but there's going to be some percentages there. So we were fortunate enough and a little bit fortuitous in our timing to freeze the business in a family trust in 2019.
Good.
And that was before a very aggressive growth curve hit and an aggressive change in the valuation of my space as well. So we're in a wonderful place right now to have these conversations and have been having them to say, hey, how do we treat this fairly? How do we reward the people who are doing the work that is creating the growth? And how do we also use this tool and the trust freeze that's set up to establish and make sure that everybody is fairly treated? And that's been facilitated by our accountants, our lawyer. We have a bit of a trust advisor as well. To have really, and we're not to the finish line here, but we've had a ton of really great conversations as a family that are so hard to say like, hey, it's, I can speak from my personal perspective. Until my step family came in, I thought I was getting, at least half the business, if not more of it, when I found out my sister wasn't going to do it. So it's, as the dominoes change, we had to have very been in hard conversations with my dad to say, what are you going to do here? And more importantly than just having the conversations is papering it.
Yeah.
And that's it's, you can have great conversations, is all to the end of the world, but the personal struggles I had where I was seeing the business do this, growing organically by between 18 to 25 points a year, and the valuations of the industry increasing from 6 to 8 times EBITDA to I've seen 14.2 EBITDA now in the space over the past.
It's recurring revenue.
Exactly. It's the
model.
It's the original
subscription model.
It's original SaaS. That's how I always phrase it. It's the original SaaS model. Started hundreds of years ago, right? It's the first one that ever really existed. And so it all ties up. And I'm seeing this go, and I'm like, hey, like, as dad stepped away and stepped back, and I'm doing the work, and now Steve, my stepbrother, stepped in and doing the work. It's like we're driving this growth valuation.
Right. It's just not happening by itself. We're the drivers and the creators of this.
Yeah, and you drove it to here, and that's awesome. And this is where the freeze comes into our, our attribution as well. Very fortuitously, not saying we planned it this way by any stretch, where we can establish a little bit of that was the timing that we really did take over. And so we're having those conversations now of where the post-freeze shares are shifting to and how they shift. That's brought me a lot more comfort because we've started to, obviously, I mentioned joining EO earlier, and you need the shares to do it. So I've begun that sessioning of shares in the post-freeze environment. That's given us a lot of creative freedom to not jeopardize the financials of the family business in a forced buyout scenario that could be strapping, where I know, and I'll share the story of I mentioned my grandfather passed away very early. So in 2013, my grandma passed away, and in that situation, we had a tax liability of about $3.7 million for a business that generated at the time about $4.5 million in revenue, because the business was in that trust from 79 to 2013. So we had life insurance policies and cash reserves, but the strategy and the planning behind it was piss poor, entirely fair about where it landed. And of course, you learn that after the fact, after you pay the bill. And that's what's really sent us down the path of like, hey, and Dad and I have this conversation over the time. I'm like, I don't want to be in your position ever. How do we stop it? How do we make sure it goes to me and then my kids and everything that goes with it in a way that doesn't ever bootstrap the business, is fair to everyone, and we can keep this train rolling?
And this is really what led us to create the blueprint that Trevor and I created. And that is, how do we keep a multi-generational business or first-generational business moving efficiently, effectively? Tax liability, obviously, is a big piece of it. Trevor owns a CPA firm. That's a big piece of it. But just the nuts and bolts of it, right? Imagine if today, if something were to happen to you, Are you married with kids?
Yeah. Yeah. Two girls, 6 and 3.
Right. So you're married with kids. Fortunately, you have a stepbrother that's in the business. So if something were to happen to you, he knows how to run payroll on Friday. He knows how to run the business. It would be a loss, but it wouldn't be a tragedy because your wife doesn't need to step in and run the business tomorrow, right? So you're actually in a good position. But what we find is so many entrepreneurs, nobody wants to think that they're going to die, right? We always push that off. And the whole reason that we're working is to provide for our family. And so often we leave our family in this precarious situation where it's like, honey, you don't even know where all the assets are. You don't need to know how to get to them. You don't know how to run the business. And it prevents this absolute disaster on top of a loss of their loved one. And it's like, we need to fix this. So this is a really good conversation. And you're in a great position with the trust. I mean, you're forward thinking about this stuff.
So intentional.
Yeah, but so many people don't because we don't want to. It's like we're going to live forever. We're going to conquer the world.
Well, I'll share this story to that topic because I appreciate the sentiment a ton, and it goes back to philosophically a little bit how I think about business, and I only think about my business, although no intention of selling for a long time, but I believe it's only as good as if what it's worth tomorrow, and it's only as good as if I die to this point. I'm comfortable looking at my mortality in that way to say if I'm gone, could this keep going? Because I needed to support my family. I needed to do all those things. So it's the humbleness and or humbleness, maybe the wrong word, but the idea of just being comfortable that I don't need to be everything. And that's one lesson I got from my father the hard way. And what I mean by that is he was just one of the best salespeople I've ever met to this day. And when I came into the business, I realized, pretty quickly coming from B school, thinking that, like I know systems and things and how to do this is crazy. We need to change all this stuff. There was a lot of that ignorance, arrogance coming in from myself, fighting with a traditional, I lead by example. I just do this really well and other people follow me. But we had a setup where it was him, a manager, and 30 staff. Yeah. So he became the bottleneck. And to your point, if he disappears and goes away, the pressure goes to where? And that was my motivation in seeing and understanding as I got into the business a few years to go, oh God, no, we need levels. We need a team. We need people to fit. And I drew it out again, accidentally, but as I did more learning, I realized there's quite a bit of intentionality to what I was doing. I just started writing down things I hated doing.
I love that.
That was my list. And I go, that's an HR person.
Yep.
That's this. That. And that's who I went and hired. Yeah. And it's the hardest conversation to have with my dad, who was a lead by example. I'll just go sell more to make more money. Yeah. I want to hire an HR person. Well, they don't sell. What are they going to make me? And I'm like, I can't prove this to you for another 12 months when the numbers come in, but I promise you, if I have more time to do not that,
right,
I'm going to put in things that are going to be far more revenue generating, and we're going to recreate and grow the chain and go. And that was that was one of the hardest conversations we've ever had to get that over the line. Yeah. But the best hire we ever made, and he will admit that to this day.
Nice.
So it's one of those battle of visions and tradition, and I've done this for years and years, and this is how it works.
Yeah. I meet people every week that say, oh yeah, I'm a business owner. I'm like, tell me about your business. They tell me about their business. I'm like, are you really a business owner, or are you an operator that happens to own shares in the business? It's like, can you disappear for 6 months and not do anything? And does the business grow? And are you wealthier when you come back in 6 months? No, you can't do that because you're running the business. Nothing wrong with that at some point. But if you're always doing that, you run the risk of that business failing. If you're
Thor loves to hammer that home.
I do.
It's a very good point. But like Zach, on that list that you made, it's like one of the first things I always talk about is like this brain dump list. All the things that you could do, should do, don't want to do, don't have the time to do. Like get that onto this list. The things that you don't like doing, and that's your first hire. Right. That's going to get all this stuff off your plate. And if you want to go sell, great. But if you want to just kind of think about strategy more in developing the business, spend that time there. So your dad, you said it was him, an office manager, and 30 staff.
Yeah.
So he was just selling, producing.
Yeah, he was our number one producer.
Yeah. Okay.
And was the manager, managed the service team, and a sales team of 10 who had no tangible metrics behind them. He
Okay.
actually didn't believe in showing them their numbers. And that was when I realized one of my biggest opportunities in the business, because my mind was fresh out of B school structure and KPIs and metrics and let's build a business. I to your point of how business owners and versus operators think, though, I think, which is brilliant. It's rare air to meet people who can bring themselves to that 40,000 feet and think strategically about the business, especially when it's tied to the emotional side of your family and
Yeah.
everything else that goes with it. So I struggled with that as well. And I didn't always live up here by any stretch. I mean, my example was, as I look back now with a clear, 2020 vision, was someone who was a hard worker who, killed himself for the business, but led by example and was his own bottleneck.
Yeah.
And that I had to learn just through osmosis more than anything, that the last thing I want to be is the bottleneck to this business. I need, and to that point, find good people to fill the things that I can't accomplish on my own, that I don't even want to do, was the baseline of how it started. And then the intentionality came of, oh, that did work. What else am I, look in the mirror and admit to yourself what you're not good at. I'm a terrible marketer, awful marketing hire. But go get somebody who knows the space, knows what to do. I am not, proud enough to ever say it's, but I did always find myself still the struggles of that constant entrepreneurial trap of, what do I pass off? Sales being the hardest one. That's my natural gift if I'm going to choose one, and what I'm able to do and communicate with people. And again, it's a product in insurance that I whiteboard it for people all the time for fun, because it's the least sexy industry. And Thor, you can appreciate this a ton, right? It's on paper from the outside, it's the least sexy industry in the world. But
Yeah, but it's interesting, especially when you get on the corporate side. There's a lot of nuances. It's not just X, Y. I always used to make fun of the property guys. Rate times value. What's the big deal? Now he does. He's been doing. He's the leading windstorm broker in the United States, if not the world. Now it's like, okay, I think he chose the right lane.
well, here's what I'll say about the product as a whole. And we're most P&C across the board, home, auto, business, a little bit of financial services stuff, but mostly focused on the home, auto, business side. I whiteboard it for anybody who's looking into the industry all the time. Oh, you can sell things, right? You've got charisma, you're a salesperson. We all know a salesperson when we meet them. It's fantastic. I have a product for you to sell. I'm not going to tell you anything about the product except two things. One, every single human being who owns anything is required by law to buy this product. And two, they don't know anything about it. Would you like to sell this product? Because you are now selling insurance.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Right. And when you think about that from just a holistic salesperson or business mind, it's like,
Yeah, and everybody hates buying it.
Absolutely. They just want somebody they trust. They want to be able to deliver it fast, and they want to be able to then communicate with that person should they need it.
Yeah.
And that's what's getting lost in my space, to go off that tangent, is we get the mass M&A, is it all goes to call centers, and you can never the same person. They don't really know who you are, become a number. And we see that as just this massive opportunity to continue to scale out, through automation, through a lot of things on the back end, but still deliver personalized service at scale.
Yeah.
And solving that egg for us is just, what we're obsessing about right now, that a customer experience through that whole journey, and being able to step on it and making sure we can evolve it to where it needs to go.
So you're focusing on home and auto mainly. Okay. So the other, like life insurance, disability, that's not a focus of your practice at all.
No, so the life and disability side, we do have a couple agents. We just started up that side of the business,
Yeah.
but the bread and butter is home and auto, and then the business side as well. So we do a lot of CGL and professional, and
Okay.
across the board there. Yeah.
Do you find
Recurring
yourself
revenue.
working?
Recurring revenue. Every year you're buying a new one.
Right.
Do you
Absolutely.
find yourself working with other families, and kind of talking about your story, and kind of, do you use that to kind of leverage your marketing and your story at all?
No,
Really?
not enough, not enough. And yeah, I mentioned I'm a terrible marketer. So it's something we're not shy about it by any
Yeah.
stretch, but it's not the focus of what we push to date.
Okay.
Um, we really focus on, and I think we can sell a brand in our space, but again, if people don't understand the product, are they going to take them time to understand the brand? So we
Mm,
really focus on the personal relationships because they're trying to find somebody they trust and build a relationship with. And yes, we're not going to shy away from the fact that they work from a 155-year-old family business. That's part of it. But they care more about Tim because Tim's their guy and they trust Tim. And Tim's going to be the person they call and they do it, and they want Tim. So what do we do to promote their personal brand layered on ours? So not that the story's never shared and people do appreciate it. That is part of what we do.
mhm.
But we spend a lot more time focused on the personal branding of our individuals and making sure that they're the focus in the front to build that real, again, trust within the relationship as best we can. And our, corporate brand, if you will, is less of a focus, but we just in-house marketing like 2 months ago. So new frontier for us for how we're going to attack this a little bit differently, but it speaks to how much low-hanging fruits out there. Because I got a marketing budget, talking about the joys of the family business. I got a marketing budget about 2 years ago for the first time. So we've been doing this all with $0 of marketing. And now we have some of that, and I'm learning the hard way by trials and tribulations of where to go and what to do with it. We're really excited about where we found ourselves through that experimentation and what we're going to be able to do going forward.
I would actually contend, Zach, that you're an excellent marketer, but you're not using a megaphone to shout to the masses. You're using your own voice to market Zach.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I
Right?
think
I mean, that's what it is, right? It's just the vehicle which you've chosen. You've chosen an intimate one-on-one marketing campaign to build rapport, and that's been effective, and it's very effective. And too many people in business lose sight of that, and they just want everything through a call center and click this button, buy your thing here, and I don't even know who you are.
and it becomes and especially like in Ontario where we are the for auto insurance, we're the second most expensive insurance market in the world in Ontario.
Wow.
So we talk about the price per acquisition, like you buy a car insurance, depending on where you guys are. The average cost of car insurance in Ontario is about 1,800 to 2,000 per vehicle. So these aren't like just throw the credit card down and go $50 a month and see you later, like your Netflix subscription. There's serious money people are paying to be able to get. Now, the coverage we have in Ontario is some of the best in the world as well, in terms of the depths it goes to for medical and other sides of it. So there's reasons. It's government run, it's set up that way, the rates are regulated. So it's all tied to what that is. So we talk about the regular home and auto transaction, like to a family unit. That's upwards of, if you're going 2 cars in a home, you're approximately $5,000 a year. Like that's your average client base. So these aren't small things. So when we talk about, the comfort of being able to go online and not know what it is, and then we're putting a policy together that if we do it wrong and your asset, the most expensive asset you built in your home, is in flames, you're going to trust yourself to click the right 4 buttons or have the right 3 questions to make sure that's done the right way. And the great part, and I'm very much a glass 75% full guy, in case you couldn't tell, but the great part about all the changes happening and how much more technical and the challenges of weather and the industry and everything that goes with it is it just as job security for us. Because the harder the product gets to understand, the more value we have being able to sit down and be willing to take the time to explain it in enough detail that the person understands and we can give them the product they actually need, not the one they can click 4 times to get that probably doesn't actually fit what's going on.
I love how passionate you are. Like it's just
Yeah.
like it's just oozing out of you. I'm curious about like across the dinner table, at Christmas, etc. Do y'all ever turn it off? Do you have to consciously say, like my wife and I had date night last night. We're not talking about business. 10 minutes into the drive, we start talking about business. It's like we can't help it sometimes. Tell me about that. Do you all have to try? Do you embrace it and say, "Hey, we're never turning it off," or do you say, "Listen, we need to be a little bit more intentional," or does it ebb and flow? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's kind of like you said in our scenario as well. There's a lot of times where we try to be very intentional about not doing it, but it becomes a really natural ebb and flow in what we do because there is a lot of passion around it. And
Yeah.
fortunately for my stepbrother and I, we're very much lockstep in our beliefs on how it goes. So we just enjoy talking about it in general, right? It's the thing we're passionate about, what we want to do in terms of the larger family and as things go. It's it's a little bit more intentional to stay away from it at the dinner table. My grandma always told me, and my grandma was a huge part of my life, the one who took over the business and got the license to keep it going. But she said my grandfather, when he was alive, he'd come home and the first thing he did, we got home, was he'd hang up his fedora on the wall. And then he'd walk in and she'd ask how his day was. His response would be, when my fedora is hung up, my work's done. We can talk about anything else. So that was his way of separating church and state, if you will, right? No, office is here. And that was a lesson I took from her that I still think about to this day, that I try to implement in my own life. And, I, like mentioned, I have two young kids and my beautiful wife at home. And I do my very best to try and live up to that, but it is very hard. There's no way around it to sometimes let that bleed out. The frustrations, the stresses, everything that goes with it, to be able to compartmentalize that in the minute to do it. But yeah, I think our larger family unit, to that point, it very much starts like you said. We try and be focused on the family and everything, and then by the time you get to the second course, it's like, okay, what was the P&L last month? Like, what are we doing here, right? Like, it's
Mhm.
hard not to drop off that path.
It's a weird thing, right? Like I'd say this year, I've been so passionate about the work we're doing. I am just so energized to keep on working and going. And Thor and I talk about this. Um, but it gets into overworking and not stopping like 7 days a week, Saturday and Sunday, and my wife calling me out. Hey man, like you got to be present, right? But it ebbs and flows, right? And so that's what we're trying to work on right now. Like last year, I had a great balance. This year, it's just I'm going crazy mode, And so I think it's an ongoing conversation, and it's not like it's ever just going to get solved, right? But we have to work on having and being intentional about having weekly family meetings, and just kind of celebrating our wins. Thor's a big, he talks about that a lot, on at least a quarterly basis, because it's so easy just to kind of run and then just forget about celebrating. It's always chasing growth or whatever motivates you.
Well, and I'll share this story. We had to that point because I think it's so relevant, and the reframe that needs to happen. And I'll share the story in hopes that people don't get to these places before it does. So we had a scenario recently where we had to let go of our controller because we found money bleeding out of the business. And we'd been in such an aggressive, exciting growth mode. The family unit was just excited about dollars and cents coming out. And all of a sudden, the stresses of those dollars and cents, as things were growing so rapidly, started to really creep up and be everybody's focus. What am I getting out of this? And this crisis hits, cash flow goes to shit in a day, and we're sitting, this is 3 months ago, so it's very fresh, and the reframe we got out of that was like, okay, like, wait, we do ultimately all actually care about the family business, and the actions of the rest of the family surrounding it scream that. So although over that period we were, starting, the things in your back of your mind being like, hey, like, there's people pulling out resources that probably shouldn't, but fortunately we're flush and things are moving, to crisis. If they're going to keep expecting this, we're done. Like, that's it. This business is over. And now their reaction be like, no, 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 we're good. We're going to find our way through this. We're going to work our way together. And so that crisis of, the tie of, again, this goes to the good side of the family being the business.
Mhm.
These are shareholders who just care about the bottom line.
Right.
Huge, huge issue.
That's beautiful. So you're saying y'all went through a little cash crunch and essentially had to freeze dividend payments or distributions to family members, and
Exactly.
everybody agreed, transparent, and moved forward. And this is just a
The,
hiccup.
The support, yeah, the support we got out of it, given what occurred. It was just a comedy of unfortunate errors that caused a mass
Yeah.
tax bill,
Well,
unfortunately.
you've been around 155 years, right?
Definitely.
Your family is very long-term thinking,
Yeah.
right? Which is a big challenge with any Gen 1, Gen 2 business. I mean, your first goal as a Gen 1 company is to make profit, right? To put food on the table. So we're kind of very short term. But especially when you're working with partners, if it's a capital reinvestment, a new initiative that you might be going, a new market you might be going into, not everybody's going to be bought into a short-term cash crunch. It's the first hiccup in the road that many companies have of like, are we going to agree to see beyond the next 6 months for this 3 year, 5 year, 10 year vision?
When your
And
company is 3 years younger than the country, I think you have a moral obligation to keep it going. I
it,
mean, like, just keep going.
yeah, there's, and that's is life stages too, right? Like that comes into it. My dad's 68 years old, and he worked his ass off for this business, and he didn't take a lot. And now all of a sudden the cash starts coming in, and he sees it, and he's like, I deserve this, and he does. There's no way around it. But we came through a time, and Thor, our industry in terms of COVID being CPC and bonus contingent checks, like
Oh
the
yeah,
best years ever because nobody was
yeah,
driving. So there's
yeah,
no accidents.
yeah.
And we were cash flush and things were moving. And it became a conversation of, dollars and cents out of the business in a logical way. And we were good. But then this happens and we're back to normal contingents and things are moving, still doing very well on the organic to a bit of a downward shift. And like I said, just a big hit in the middle of what was an otherwise great time to be able to sit down. It was a hard conversation because it becomes just the expectations of the family. Like, hey, we were doing this, so we're getting this. Like, we're not doing that anymore. What are we going to do? And that unknown, again, just should be, but never taking it for granted, right? And not, I don't think, I think the conversations we have had through the trust conversations led to this being a much easier conversation than what could have been what I given the experience. But yeah, I'm with you on that.
What advice do you have for family businesses?
Communication, it's
Be
everything.
more specific on communication.
Yeah, I think it's so important that everybody understands where they stand, what their value, you can attribute it a ton of ways, and it's not just how much shares you get or what your salary is. It's what are the expectations, and understanding that this is a business, not the family. New information, new solution. Because in a family, it's often well, these are the way things are, and we love each other, and the love's solid, and all those things are true. That's a different relationship than the business. If there's something different in the market and things change all the time and things are constantly moving, you have to be flexible to whatever that business is, but you have to communicate those changes in a way that's healthy, or that resentment between family members can pile up and build up to a place that causes this to go. And, the stresses, the joys of success are only equaled with the stresses of success in terms of to what I kind of got to earlier, more money equals different conversations. And
Yeah.
if you're not constantly having them in a healthy way, it can derail what's otherwise a really great business on the whole.
Yeah. And obviously document that in writing. What are the expectations? What's the process? How do things change? Do you utilize any outside advisors in order to help kind of remove the internal, hey, they're the professional, they're going to help us through this phase. Have you done that, and has that been effective?
Yeah, so going back to the 2013 and so the tax implication, it started with our accountant, and our accountant is he's incredible, but he really piggybacked putting a team together that included a lawyer and a specific trust advisor. So having those three kind of coordinate everything we're doing and allowing my dad the time and space to understand what it means and that it can change and that it's malleable and he's in control of it took its time to get through what the purpose and the goal of this whole thing was. Um, but we've gotten there through time and communication. But it's without that, without the outside help, we would have been entirely lost. We would have never been able to do it.
And do you use outside advisors to help structure the communication with the family of, what's expected? That was more specifically my question.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think that's entirely fair. Yes. So there's an annual meeting we have on it now that is really driven by what's changed, what's happening.
Yeah.
And we're, not always with the whole family unit, but certainly the family unit that's working in the business right now. And when we need to bring in the extended family unit, we do, and it's usually moderated by one of those individuals.
2013, 12 years ago, right? I mean, so this sounds like this has been a very long process in the making, and it's still evolving.
You're going to always you're going to always find something new and something interesting. I think we've just, when you get comfortable and things are settled and things are at a kind of good spot, so a new challenge comes up, like our crisis I mentioned this year a little bit earlier. So that kind of can shake the foundation. You wonder how things go. But the key is we went from not really understanding anything a few years back, and that's difficult for even myself, where I was going through it and my dad has complete control and I'm seeing the business do this. And I don't know until 3 years ago if I'm actually going to get any of it. Like, I've had the conversation. He said it to me. I believe him, but there's nothing on paper that says that that's true.
And what happened if something happened to him in the meantime? What would happen?
What would happen? I had no idea.
Yeah.
So we're now in a place where I do know, and I have seen it, and I see where that paper goes. And it's been communicated to the family accordingly, and everybody's comfortable with where they sit today. But, as we do this, that trajectory may change again.
Yeah.
If we continue to grow, there's more conversations to be had. And it's nice with how we set up the trust, and it's our ability to take it to whatever place we need to before we wrap it up. Is we have the time. We have the time to do it, but my drive towards the business, my personal drive towards the business went like this as soon as I saw it on paper.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to it all. It wasn't that I didn't believe my dad. Of course I believed him, but it's entirely it just knowing where it stands. And to the point you made earlier, if husband and wife, if that's the scenario and the wife comes in or husband comes in when the wife dies of this, whatever it is, they don't know anything about where anything goes, the stress and the nightmare that can cause, and the direction otherwise was built and set up to be ready to go, is something that's constantly on my mind. So I wanted to be sure of where I was going, what I was fighting for, and what was my effort worth it. So in terms of that, love and passion for the business, it's not that it ever waned. It was just simply, I had this thing in the back of my head that said, who am I doing this for?
Yeah.
And I think that's easy for anybody in any business, let alone a family business, to go through. And probably a harder conversation when you're talking to your dad or somebody than you are to your boss as you're going through it. So I'm
curious. I'm curious about the kind of the personal continuity for
Mhm.
you. You've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. What are your intentions? I mean, you're very long-term thinking, obviously, as a family. Have you spoke about between you and your wife or your parents, about the kids?
Yeah, so Chet, in terms of potential, my nothing would make my dad prouder than seeing Generation 6 work in the business. And I go back to my time, and my parents were amazing to me. They encouraged me to do anything else I want. But my grandma was like, as soon as you're done school, get your ass to work, right? Like, go figure it out. You know where you belong, kind of thing. And which I always loved her for. She was amazing, but it was very intentional there. I think I think to the point of the kids and what's going on, like the nice part about the trust setup is we're already talking about how we're protecting their future to start with. That's priority number one, where they want to go in their life. And, will our 55-year-old family business still exist by the time they're, ready to go? I sure hope so. That's absolutely my intention. I would love to be able to push that. Um, there's also, the thought of our industry and how it could evolve and change and all the prevailing winds of maximizing the value and what makes sense. There's so much M&A in the space. There's massive offers. There's things that could protect our family for years and years and years. So I'm not ignorant to any of those. I don't want to be. But I would love to see the day where my daughters did step into that role. They know about the business quite well. My daughter my 6-year-old is very versed on what we do. So, but by no means am I trying to groom her in any stretch. But she knows what the office does, and she's pretty excited about it.
Well, it gives you so much clarity, right? So your father would love nothing more for them to be involved in the business. You as well, right? We come across some families that, there was a sudden death in the family and they took over the business, but there was never any communication of the intents of the parents or the generations before them. So, when there's private equity coming in and, valuations have tripled,
Yeah. And
maybe,
that does haunt him, by the way, Trevor. Like
yeah, I
drives
bet.
every day. He's like, I don't know what my dad wants me to do because he
Yeah,
never told me. Did he want me to keep this
yeah.
generationally, or did he just want to do it as a job and because it has their name on the building, right?
Hmm.
So it has an added thing to it, and it's like he struggles with it because he gets offers all the time, and he's like, I got to do what dad wanted me to do, but he doesn't know what it is.
And that's been coming up so often frequently in all different kinds of conversations is this is where the legacy thing comes in, right? You don't really think about it until you come to that kind of crossroads. And we've that into the blueprint of talking about, I mean, it's just a conversation. It has nothing to do with the numbers.
Yeah.
It's about what your vision is, what is driving you, because through the ups and downs, that longer term vision that's what keeps you going, right? You can lose money, but if that vision is intact, who cares about if I lost a couple, some dollars, this month or this year, because
Absolutely.
that's what I'm driving towards.
And to speak to that, my dad has always made it very clear he would never sell this business,
Yeah.
and he wants it to continue on, Jed.
Perfect. You got that box checked.
Absolutely, and that's one thing I'll say. And I love it. So a funny story, because to your point of my industry, M&A is huge. I get calls all the time, and I always used to handle them the exact same way, even from when I was 25, and I didn't have a title at that point in the business, but they saw this last name Sutherland, and Sutherland's on the wall, so they assumed I was somebody. I'd get calls all the time. They run through their pitch, and just before they're ready to ask me to go for lunch, because that was always the way. I skipped a lot of free lunches. I regret that now. I should have gone, but I'd always say the same thing. And they get to that point, I'd be like, listen, before we go to lunch, let me make it really easy for you. $100 million.
Yeah.
They're like, what? I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, 100 million. I'll walk away from 150 years of my family for $100 million. No problem.
Right.
Yeah, I can be bought. Totally fine with it.
Yeah.
We're-
Perfect.
no, yeah.
Makes
There
it
you go.
very clear.
They're like, oh, don't think you're there yet. I'm like, okay, well,
Okay.
call me when you're
Call me
ready.
back.
Have a
Call me
good
next year.
one.
Hey, Zach, what gap or what's missing? Where's the gray area, personally? And it obviously involves the business as well. But for just you, for Zach, what is missing? Where's the gray area? What haven't you thought about in the event something happened to you tomorrow or tonight? What piece haven't you documented? What bit of information have you not passed along to your wife that you're missing? Where are the gaps? Have you
Yeah.
identified those?
No, I think that's a great question. And I would say the gaps are more, and this goes back philosophically to how I think about the business. I planned it so that if I disappear, it's going to be okay. So I'm not really worried about the business.
The business, yeah.
Ready to go. But to your point, I've spent so much time focused on that.
You
I
haven't done it on personal.
I've rarely done anything other than had very verbal conversations about this is the plan and this is how it goes, but I don't even really have the paper to show you that yet. So what would my wife do in that moment? Now I know that, knowing the family and how it goes, I know she would be more than taken care of, and so my kids, and that would be it. But would she have any idea how that's structured or how that works? Absolutely not.
Well, this is my shameless plug. This is not for you, Zach, but everyone watching this video, that's what we've created. We've answered the questions, and it's taken us, and every day there's new things added onto it. It's like, oh, I didn't think about that. But it's so important, this blueprint we're putting together. We're actually spending next weekend together, Trevor and I'm flying down to Puerto Rico just to, huge room whiteboarding and like what else is missing.
Yeah, and it's been my most visited document over the last 3 years. I'm in it every single day, every single week, constantly evolving it. It's nuts. I mean, and again, I think it was kind of one of these things that it doesn't just, it's not like a check the box, it's done. It
Yeah.
evolves.
And it's a living document because what's changed? I realize that I have a crypto wallet with a very specific, key that is not online anywhere. My kids would never find that.
Yeah.
They'd have no idea. And everything I put into that would be lost forever.
Yeah.
The thing I'm working for is to give to them, and it's
They can't get it.
lost.
Yeah,
And that
they
just
can't see
kills
it.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting point, and it's not one we've gone down the path of. And I think it's such I've always believed, like, where you put your focus, you can't, jack of all trades, master of none. Is what I'm getting at, right? If you're going to do one thing. So I've tried to be really intentional with my time and my focus, and that often leads to those misses. As you build out and evolve the plan of, hey, this is how it goes. The business, we feel really comfortable with where we stand, but this is one, an eye-opening conversation to me, which I appreciate. But two, I think there's so much value in being able to just have that understood, because that's all I was chasing in my business for years and
Yeah.
years, is an understanding of where I stood and what it meant.
Yeah.
And
It's kind of like life insurance.
very much so.
It's like you hope you never have to trigger it, but if you do, at least there's money there for my
Yeah.
family.
Oh, and the amount of people who don't even understand how, where is that policy?
Hello, yes.
How does that work? What number do I
Yes.
call? The very simple, easy, like the amount of unclaimed life insurance policies post death, is the stats on it are absolutely insane,
Okay.
because people just don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
And all that needs to be is, here's a piece of paper with a policy number and a company name, and that's it. That's all that needs to be understood. But who
Yeah.
takes the time to know that I put it in this folder, or put it here, or this is where it belongs?
And as our lives go on, they get more complicated, right? And as Thor said, I got another crypto kind of
Yeah.
wallet, or you lent somebody some money, or there's all
Yeah,
kinds
that's a
of
great one. Hold on. See, I
different
tell you, this list just keeps expanding. Do
every
you
single
have
week.
anybody that owes you money? Are
Every
there any?
single week. Yeah.
Yeah.
As it goes on, one of the things that it teaches you is to try to simplify things as much as possible. Once you kind of do this brain dump of these are all the accounts I have, it's like, okay, well, let's consolidate these things, right? Do I really need the Nancy Pelosi tracker stock thing in this random, TD Ameritrade account? Can I consolidate that somehow?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
uh
And what to keep in place too. Really important that you keep the deceased person's cell phone activated, their emails activated, right? Because those are the tools that they use in order to verify accounts.
yeah.
When those aren't there, it is a nightmare.
Well,
Yeah.
Zach, we're coming up in an hour, man. You've been super generous with your time and
Yeah, this has been
experience
good.
share. It's fantastic.
Hey, not a problem, guys. I appreciate it a ton. I appreciate the conversation. You guys are doing awesome things. So happy to share at any point, and keep the good times going. It's a fun time, and it's a blessing to be in a family business in so many ways. But it's nice to be able to talk openly about, some of the struggles and some of the realities, because if it can help even one person find a better path, that's
That's
all we ever want.
what